Welcome to the Stories of Market Research, the Insightrix podcast. I'm Sharday Torgerson, the creative and digital strategist at Insightrix in Saskatoon, Canada, and your host. I'm excited to welcome our guests for this episode, Leib Litman and Cheskie Rosenzweig with CloudResearch in New York. Leib is the co-founder and chief research officer at CloudResearch. And as a data quality fanatic, Leib's main priority is to develop tools that improve quality data on online platforms. We're also joined by Cheskie, senior researcher and product scientist with CloudResearch. Cheskie has helped CloudResearch develop Sentry, a data quality tool that uses advanced behavioral and technological vetting to make sample fraud a thing of the past. Thank you both for joining me. So thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you both taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat. Leib, I know we were kind of talking about the fact that summer, we're, kind of playing a little bit of phone tag. Seems like everyone's kind of getting back together, really enjoying these, conferences. I know ESOMAR 75 was a couple of days ago. So connecting with old colleagues, some connections, and it's been quite a summer. How's it been for you guys?
Yeah, thanks, Sharday. Thank you so much for having us here. The summer has been great. ESOMAR was great. I just actually came back from ESOMAR. Just flew back yesterday afternoon, and that was a great conference. I was part of the panel there on data quality, and it was a really fantastic discussion. And there seems to be a tremendous amount of interest in the industry about data quality right now, and it's just great to be part of the conversation. So, thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Great to be here. Pleasure, nice to meet you. Yeah, it's certainly been quite busy. Apologize for all the back and forth that was necessary to finally happy to finally be here, and I wish things were slowing down a little bit, but I'm also glad they're busy.
I feel that. I think we're in the exact same position. We're all going into Q4 like, oh, this is amazing. But we're also like, wow, the research is picking up. People are really diving into these innovative technologies and really getting an appetite again for some primary work. So I'm all for it. But, maybe before we actually dive into this conversation about data quality, is why I looped you guys in. I wouldn't mind actually knowing a little bit more about yourselves and about CloudResearch. Leib, let's start with you. As the co-CEO of CloudResearch, I'd love to hear a little bit more about yourself and how things at CloudResearch maybe got started.
Well, my background is in experimental psychology. So I was an experimental psychology professor for many years. And experimental psychology is a discipline that deals with methodology and statistics. And I began to apply my sort of academic background to online research about 10 years ago. And I created some tools along with Jonathan Robinson, who's the other co-CEO at CloudResearch. And he's a computer scientist. He's a professor of computer science. So the two of us kind of merged computer science and behavioral science, and we created some tools. Originally, the tools were really used by academics, and that's how CloudResearch got started. We got started in academia, and as the tools became used more and more within academia, we realized that there was a tremendous opportunity for application outside of academia, in market research and in polling and in various kinds of government research, and that's where we really started to expand beyond academia. And what we found was that across all these different industries, even though they're very different, the issues that they tackle are different, the ways that they do things are different. Despite all these differences, there's one commonality, and that is that they're all experiencing data quality problems.
Yep.
And that's where our tools that we created to solve those problems really fit across the industry.
I love it. It's something I'm hearing quite often on the podcast is a lot of folks are coming into the industry with a great passion, and they find a gap and they hone in on it, and they kind of provide a tool and or a service to really make this industry better. We're seeing it more and more, folks like yourself, just incredibly smart people, and really developing these tools and then finding, an opportunity within, areas of market research. So I find that really interesting about CloudResearch. I've been hearing a lot about you guys as well. So Cheskie, how did you get started as a senior researcher and products scientist? Actually, that's kind of cool at CloudResearch.
Yeah, well, that's a cool title.
Yeah. Tell me more.
Yeah, so I've been working full time at the company for just around 3 years now. And I actually started getting interested in data quality a lot longer ago than that. Believe it or not, once upon a time, I was Leib's undergraduate student at
nice.
college, and kind of my introduction to the world of psychology research and also data quality. So I took a brief detour after undergrad to go get a PhD in clinical psych, which I'm still finishing up, just in the last couple of months, hopefully. And
final leg of the race, eh?
Yeah, exactly. But rejoined CloudResearch full time about 3 years ago to really focus on building out some of the data quality tools that the company's been working on for years, and this product that we have called Sentry in particular, which really kind of one of the leading products in the marketplace for quality, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit, but it's kind of what I live and breathe these days. So that's what I talk about.
I love it. Then it clearly sounds like we're talking to the right crew today about data quality. That's why we're jumping in on maybe discussing some, things around sample quality, online research as a whole, right? So even within the industry, today's online research environment has, many threats to data quality and the whole validity around online market research. I know at Insightrix, conducting, online research is a huge part of our service offering as a market research firm. And undoubtedly, data quality is an important topic, but also it's an inherently entwined within the processes that we do. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about how CloudResearch helps organizations, say like Insightrix, find ways to ensure that data quality, especially maybe in online research environments like panels, maybe actually before we get into some of these exciting questions, I wouldn't mind setting the stage a little bit. And this is a question perhaps for both of you. Maybe we'll start with Leib, but what does data quality ultimately mean when we're talking about it in maybe even the facet of market research?
Sure. That's a really great question. And I guess let me talk about maybe the opposite of good data quality, which is flawed.
Love it.
So what is bad data quality, right? So maybe you could start from there. So bad data quality really is multifaceted. There are many different things involved, but one unifying feature is that there's some kind of intentional circumvention of the survey process for monetary gain. So when we see that, right, we want to try to remove that. But there are different kinds of fraud, right? And I'll give you some examples. So if people are trying to collect rewards in a survey without really being qualified for the survey, without making an effort to pay attention, while trying to bypass as much of the survey as possible, not being honest, pretending to be someone that they're not, taking surveys that they're not qualified to take because maybe they're in a completely different country, fraudulently posing as belonging to a particular demographic group that they don't belong to, intentionally taking surveys more than once from multiple accounts, using some kind of automation to generate closed-ended or open-ended responses in order to bypass the survey. All of these are things that we see happening at a very high rate, recent study conducted by Case showed that about 30 to 40% of responses in a typical study do one of these things. And all of these are examples of bad data quality. So what is data quality? What is good quality? Well, good quality is when you don't have these things, right? It really is a product of a good faith attempt on the part of a participant to complete the survey questions. So that is kind of how we see what data quality is.
That sounds like it is complex, and we have quite a few things on the table to take into consideration when we're having a discussion around data quality. All of those things ring true when we're looking for recruitment, even in terms of panels, looking for survey participants, say on social media. All of those red flags really play into us as market researchers, really trying to make sure that our data, is qualified for clients. So, if fraud's really a big concern online, what are ways that we can be addressing more systemic fraud within the sample industry?
Yeah, so there are many things that people can do and they should do. First, there are tools out there that can help identify fraud. The tools that can identify that someone is putting in a good faith effort into actually answering the questions that are being asked of them, and that the person is not trying to circumvent the system in one way or another. These tools can be really effective at identifying click farms, for example, at identifying devices that are known to contain traffic, right, that is associated with bad quality data. And these tools can also be used to identify people who are inattentive, who are disengaged, who aren't being honest, and so on and so forth. But it's really a partnership, because the other thing that needs to happen is that people need to look at their own data, right, to make sure that whatever the tools are doing to clean things up, that no tool is perfect, right? So it becomes a partnership between the researcher themselves, right, and the various tools that they may be using to really make sure that the end result is as accurate as possible.
I'm hearing this quite a bit as well, where we're in this tech equilibrium in market research. We have all these great research technologies, but we also need the humans to lead it behind them. I believe this is where folks like Cheskie come into play, where we're looking at ways to monitor data quality in market research and beyond. These are tools, as mentioned, a human-centered approach. What is your guys' approach to this when we're looking at it from a market research perspective?
Yeah, so
albeit monitoring data quality in market research.
Yes, I mean, what Leib described is absolutely true. There are these quality tools that exist in the marketplace that are available. And then, of course, there's the eyes on that researchers have in the actual data that they're getting. They're both really important. And there are some of these tools that exist operate very differently. I think this is what you're getting to. Some are a little bit more focused on validating devices and ensuring that devices aren't fraudulent, that they're coming from the right place. And one of the things that we really focus on is kind of looking at not just the device, but the potential person that's sitting on the other side of the screen anytime a survey is being administered. And we've identified ways of ensuring that people who come into surveys are actually exhibiting human behaviors, and in particular, that they have kind of the key respondent characteristics that good respondents need in order to be good survey takers. So making sure that people are attentive, honest, as Leib was mentioning, some of these very basic human qualities that people need to apply to a survey in order to take it. And they need to speak the language of the survey, right? Basic things like that. And so we've been building tools that really focus not just on device, but on the humanity of the participant, and ensuring that they have these basic characteristics that every respondent needs to have in order to be high quality.
As an end user, I've noticed a shift in things like CAPTCHA. So I've noticed that even that tool itself has really start to humanize its approach to ensure that it's picking up on characteristics that may, a human may only really understand versus, choose a bridge in the background. I've noticed a shift on the end user in that perspective, and that's probably a large reason as to why. So. That's interesting. We were kind of talking about consumer insights earlier. The fact that we're a supplier panel at Citrix, we offer Citrix communities, and we service client surveys. But we've noticed as researchers who also employ supplier panels, sometimes clients may not have the same appetite for data quality controls as us in-house. Do you have any suggestions in how we can work with our clients to ensure that they understand the importance of these methods and that their data is being well represented as a result? Example, social media recruitment is something that we largely struggle with for all the reasons I think that Leib actually mentioned.
Yeah, people just need to become, I think we need a lot more awareness in the industry about just how deep the problems are. I think this is changing more and more. We see that people are becoming aware of just the scope of the issues. Just this year, if we were just to look at what are the things happening in the industry in the last 6 months.
Yep.
So we have Case, right, coming out with a huge study, right, supported by a whole bunch of brands, right, who really wanted to understand what's the scale of the data quality issue in the industry. So Case conducted a study with thousands of people from many, many different suppliers all over, standard industry suppliers, right? And their question was, okay, well, what kind of data quality problems are there in the industry? And what they found was fairly astonishing, right? 30 to 40% of respondents in a survey are fraudulent, problematic, unusable, right? So what's the impact of something like that? Well, just imagine, 30% of your people are fraudulent, right? And then the question is, well, what does that mean, fraudulent? Who are those people? And then, again, just last week, right? Not even this week, right? ESOMAR had this whole session devoted to data quality, and they had an amazing panel. It had a couple of folks from Innovate. There were some companies there that provide data quality solutions. CloudResearch was there. I was there as part of the panel. And we had this amazing discussion, and it was just an amazing experience because we had videos, right, of interviews with actual fraudsters, right? Someone who used to make a living in Venezuela, right? Filling out surveys. That's what he did all day long, right? Dozens and dozens of surveys every day, every week. And he no longer does it. So he did this interview where he basically talked about exactly what he did, how he did it, how he infiltrated these different surveys. And then there was another interview with someone from Bangladesh who actually, he's a physics student in a university, believe it or not, and he makes a living teaching other people how to get into surveys in the United States and in Europe while they're living in India and Bangladesh and other countries. And he has a YouTube channel where he has hundreds of videos teaching people how to do this, right? And so there are just tens of thousands of people out there all over the world, China, Russia, Middle East, that when you open up your survey, right, a tremendous amount of that survey is being filled out by these folks, and what that can do to the insights and the accuracy of whatever takeaways that a researcher makes from their research is really hard to fathom, right? And I think that's the most important thing, right? Making people aware of just what happens if people aren't doing their due diligence in order to protect their surveys from these kinds of problems.
So in retrospect, the idea behind it for clients is that the data quality itself is the importance. We're seeing as an industry, as you mentioned, you mentioned 30-40% the data can be bogus, upwards of 30-40%. So that alone is an indicator, I think, for clients to be aware of the potential solutions to ensure that when they are conducting online researchers with their research providers, that they're really ensuring that they're receiving quality responses. We're constantly getting questions as an insights firm ourselves, and we're always looking for ways to ensure that our clients really support these types of methods. So I'm very happy to have you guys on. In fact, I cannot wait to even share this episode with my colleagues, because we're consistently looking for new ways to innovate on this, both on the service side of things, but also on the panel providing side of things. And it is quite immense how much things have changed in the last year, but I think we should attest it a lot to education, to these types of conversations being put out there. The fact that you guys are attending even ESOMAR, a massive conference, and really, leading a conversation there that I know a lot of people even came home and kind of discussed at our table before we even jumped on the podcast. So this is really important information. And, maybe let's flip this a little on its head. So say the client is incredibly concerned about data quality controls. What are ways that we can kind of, provide sample quality tools for panel providers that help ease the client's worry?
Honestly, from my perspective, we love working with those clients, because I think there are some clients, unfortunately, they hear a trope about, and they just believe it. Oh, quality is great, or it's okay. My panel is taking care of it, right? And they might not even know who their panel is, because they're working with a research agency who's working with the panel. And so, some clients just take more of a hands-off approach. And I think it's because they haven't been to a talk like the presentation at ESOMAR, where see examples of
where they got scared silly.
Exactly. So, when a client does know about that, I think there's a sense of like, oh, we can actually help. We have tools for that. So yeah, I mean, Sentry is our product that we've been building for a while, that is really a really critical layer of protection that can help clients get good data, regardless of where the data is coming from. So Sentry can kind of be plugged in to work with any panel source and any survey platforming tool. So, essentially any supply that is coming in to a client's project is able to be vetted before it reaches the client survey. And Sentry can ask these questions, which again, get at these key human characteristics and verify them, in addition to a lot of technology running in the background to make sure that people are moving their mouse in human ways and answering open-ended questions in human ways. And so that is one tool that we are very excited about, and we can only share it with some clients who actually understand that quality is a problem, because the others are just like, well, of course they're good. Of course they're human. I'm collecting humans.
Yep. It's quite a drast in understanding, but I think what's really powerful about tools like yours, I think once you plug and play it, there, I'm sure the validity and the research changes drastically as well. I know from a panel provider perspective, it's something that we're always concerned about. So I got a question for you then, Cheskie. What would you say to a sample provider, so a sample panel provider, using only a manual process to measure respondents for duplication and fraud?
Wow. I would say come forward from the dark ages. Um, I think panel providers are sometimes in a little bit of a difficult place. Some panel providers put quality first, and other providers put like having as much traffic as humanly possible or not humanly possible first. And that there's like sometimes a balance that's going on behind the scenes where some panel providers who don't put quality first, they need to focus on their bottom line, and they want to just grow their pool of panelists as much as possible. And obviously there's a balancing act that needs to be done by each panelist, each panel supplier. And I think if they're still manually doing things, I think they're wasting a whole lot of time and effort. And I'm not sure that manual process would even yield high quality panelists, because it's not an easy thing to do to kind of really vet a sample and, make sure that the people that you're blocking are the people who are taking a class from a physicist in Bangladesh. So I think it's always good to be able to plug in existing solutions to help with that process, not to take over, because I think every panel, has their own internal kind of needs, and they need to look at the data too. But to be able to have some basic baseline and kind of standard for quality, and to use a tool to do that is really important, time saving, leads to better data, and is probably more effective. And because it's more accurate in weeding out the low quality people, it can probably help panels keeping some of that traffic as high as possible while also maximizing quality.
That's very well said. That's very well said. And it's such a common issue that we are dealing with as folks who are panel providers as well. And then again, always making sure that we're working with folks from a panel health perspective in-house to be really paying attention to the folks that are coming in, and just ensuring that they're humanized to some degree. It's an incredible undertaking. I know we have a full panel health team in-house as well that really manages this aspect, and I'm on the team, so I definitely have a bit of an insight. But it's a changing industry in consideration of online research being just much more prevalent these days. So we were kind of talking about sample accuracy. We jumped into this wonderful tool that I've been hearing lots about. It's definitely a buzz in the industry in terms of providing data quality for market researchers across the board. It has that real like for researchers by researchers vibe. I'm finding that a lot more appealing across the board in terms of the types of technologies that market researchers work with, because it's always easier for us to kind of employ a tool that we know somebody who really understands these complexities that we're dealing with. And what I'm hearing is you guys are really investing your time, CloudResearch's time, in supporting these challenges in the industry. So we're really appreciative of it. But I want to dive a little bit more into this Sentry tool. We've been kind of talking around it a little bit, but I wouldn't mind hearing about what Sentry does to leverage more of these behavioral and maybe technical tools to avoid these bogus respondents. And I mean, it's sharing it without giving too much of the meat and potatoes away. So
Sentry really has a couple of different critical components that we think are very, very important for ensuring data quality. And I guess I'll just take a step back for a second and just say that when any tool, right, has to be able to address the different kinds of fraud, and needs to be multifaceted. So, for example, some fraud comes from click farms, right? And these click farms are from other countries. So some tools need to be device focused to be able to see that traffic and to be able to keep track of that traffic and to block it, right? Other fraud comes from not India or Bangladesh. It comes from here in the United States. Somebody taking a survey without caring at all about what they're doing and just responding randomly. To the end user, there's no difference between the two, right? Because at the end of the day, your data is not usable. So whether it's somebody, who's in Bangladesh, right, posing to be someone in the US who doesn't even speak English, or whether it's someone in the US who speaks English perfectly, but they just finished playing some video game and they are being given some kind of reward for finishing the survey and they're just clicking through randomly, the end result is the same. So tools really need to be able to do both of these things. And traditional tools that are in the market really focus on the device, right? Making sure the device is coming from the right location, that there aren't too many duplicates, removing duplicates, making sure that some kind of technology isn't being used to make the person appear to be in the US when they're really somewhere else. All of these different device-based approaches are kind of traditionally what people have used for protection. But what these kinds of approaches can't really do very effectively is to address this other issue of people who are not in India, Bangladesh, Russia, or whatever, but who are just completely not paying attention, are unengaged, are trying to get into a survey and they're claiming to be a nurse when they're really are not. And these issues pose as much of a challenge, and even a bigger challenge when it comes to B&B studies, where we actually see fraud rates much higher than 40%, because it's so easy to pretend someone that you're not on these kinds of surveys. So that's really where Sentry is unique, in that it has these components, these modules that we call them. And each module is developed based on the kind of instrument development and validation principles that is part of our background, part of our academic background, right? Like, this is what we were trained to do professionally, to develop instruments for behavioral testing, right? That's what we do in clinical psychology, that's what we do in experimental psychology. So we created these modules within Sentry that look at attentiveness, that look at acquiescence bias, that look at behavioral metrics. That's the other thing that's unique to Sentry. We actually look at mouse movements to identify what are people doing on the screen that's even separate from the way they answer a question, like what answer they provide to a question, but what are they doing on the screen while they're answering the question, right? So for example, some people will have all these apps within their browser, and then they'll go off the screen, they'll click a button, and all of a sudden the entire question will be translated into a different language, like into Chinese, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Sentry automatically detects when that happens, and then that person is red flagged. There are also all kinds of other patterns that are very unique to people who are fraudulently answering surveys, and we call this behavioral metrics. So we use behavioral metrics, we use behavioral analysis, right? And we have all these different modules. We additionally have modules that are specific to B2B segments, right? So if somebody is claiming that they are an ITDM, well, how do you know that they are? Sentry has these validated instruments to actually verify that they are an ITDM, that they are a nurse, that they're a doctor, that they are, within a particular segment. And beyond that, we have incredible open-ended review solutions that are very smart. They're real AI. People always say AI, that's like the most, everybody's doing AI. We have some really, really smart AI that we're using for open-ended review that is just very, very powerful. And all of these tools are calibrated and tested to not only be accurate, but to have as few false positives as possible. And that's really a really important thing. People use these attention checks and red herrings and so forth, and what they really very much don't know, because they've never tested it, is, well, what percentage of good respondents are being prevented from participating, right? And that's something that we test for and that we really validate as standard part of Sentry development. So.
That's a really unique way of thinking about it as well. Considering we're in central Canada, in Citrix, we're in Saskatchewan, we were kind of raised on this idea that we have to fit within this nationally representative sample of the population. And yet, to have an accurate understanding of where we live, you need to have that right distribution of people. So we rarely actually get represented accurately according to national statistics as a result, because we're just too small compared to the national average. So usually we find in this case, it's super important to kind of maintain sample diversity for hard to reach segments. And you mentioned that Sentry and both CloudResearch really support even conducting things like open-ended responses, where we're finding a lot of the times that we're running into issues as a smaller sample base. We're looking for hard to reach segments. We're trying to connect with people using maybe an open link, and we're just maybe not seeing those results. It's something we struggle with quite frequently as a result of kind of the marketplace that we serve. And I really anticipate this type of tool could be really beneficial to these hard to reach segments that I know a lot of researchers are always looking at. I mean, even though we're a small marketplace, international research is another example where, you're consistently looking to ensure, sample diversity, better data quality, but, you might not even be located in the same neighborhood, the same region, never mind the same country. So I'm assuming that tool, again, would be really beneficial to be working with hard to reach segments no matter where you are. So I guess we're kind of tailing end on this conversation. We dabbled in the idea around data quality and how you guys are really investing within the industry. The Sentry tool sounds like something I need to even tap into, I'm thinking. But do you have any, and this might just be open to the floor to the both of you. I'm sure you both have different perspectives on this, but do you have kind of any predictions perhaps about the future of online research, and perhaps, how the importance of data quality will change? I know we're kind of talking about this moment of education that we're in. We're in the information era. Hopefully, even folks like yourself can be a real, influencer in that aspect of things. But I'm curious, what do you see in the future of online research, especially considering, data quality is top of mind?
Yeah, I guess just seeing what's happening in the last half a year, there's a tremendous increase in awareness. I already mentioned ESOMAR, I mentioned the case study, but Insights Association now has created a data quality task force, and we're on that task force. So we're just seeing the different people who are on the task force, who are representing so many different segments of the industry. CRC, we are with that task force making a presentation about data quality issues at the CRC in New York, and we're putting together a whole toolkit really for the industries to become more aware of the different the scale of the problem, the kinds of impacts that this problem can have on the bottom line, right? And the kind of solutions that are out there, and just some best practices. And so I think that this kind of awareness and the need and the demand really within the industry for us to do better, right, as an industry, is just gonna increase more and more, because just seeing the kind of conversations, we're just having conversations with people every single day, and also just seeing the specific ways in which data quality problems really impact brands. Like at the last Works New York conference just a month ago, there was a talk about data quality. It was presented by Case in collaboration with PepsiCo, and they gave some incredible examples where there was I think it was P&G that they ran a study with a particular go-to-market campaign for a product. I think it was a Crest, or something like that. And they conducted this whole study. They invested a tremendous amount of money in it. And in this study, respondents said that like 54% of respondents endorsed this product, said it was a great product, right? So they went to market with the product and it wasn't selling. It was getting horrible reviews. People hated it. So they were like, what happened? Right? Why we were getting such positive feedback with this study? And then turns out nobody liked the product. So then they went back. They looked at verified respondents. Instead of 54%, it was 24%. So they were figuring out what was going on. Well, it turns out in the original study, there were all these people who claimed to have used the product, but they didn't. They didn't actually use the product. They were just making it up. And people who make things up tend to be positive about everything. Yeah. Yes, they'll say yes to everything. Yes, we use the product. Yes, we love it. Yes, we're going to use it again. Yes, we're going to pay a lot of money for it, right? And so this influenced their entire campaign, millions of dollars, and it was just wasted, right? And this kind of stuff happens all the time, and people just aren't aware of it. But now people are becoming more aware of it, and they realize that, you know, whatever resources they spend, that they allocate toward preventing fraud is well worth it, considering how much it costs down the road if you don't address these issues. And you know, we've seen this so many times in other ways. We've you know, the Center for Disease Control came out with a study where they concluded that during COVID, like 10% of people were drinking bleach to prevent COVID, right? Well, it turns out 0% of people were doing it. And the 10% were these folks in Venezuela and these other people in the United States who were just like, yes to everything. And the only people who were saying that they were drinking bleach to prevent COVID, right, were people who also said like, yeah, we live on Pluto and yet we eat concrete for breakfast and like crazy things like that. Just people who we call yaysayers. So, you know, fraud is affecting our society. It's affecting science. It's affecting the industry. The more people become aware of it, the more they're going to realize, you know, we can't just keep going this way. And so, you know, to answer your question, you know, what do I think is going to happen in the future? I think in the future, in the very near future, the demand for change is going to really increase tremendously, and we're going to see change because there are tools already available. There are best practices that are already well known. It's just a matter of people starting to use them.
Yeah, I too am quite optimistic, and I think the change that's going to come is going to have to be driven by both sides. So client awareness is going to continue to grow, and as client awareness grows, demand for better quality is going to reach a point where it's actually in everyone's best interest to really put forward strict standards for quality. And, you know, once we have that awareness and standards within the industry, I think we're going to be in a better place.
Well said. That I couldn't agree more. It's such an interesting industry where we're actually trying to really meet those standards with what we're doing, and the client education is so important as well. So I honestly couldn't agree more. I appreciate both of your guys' time today. We could probably talk all day about data quality. This is a topic that both of you are very passionate about, and I think this is something that we're going to be tackling more and more as we go on. And I'm sure as an industry standard yourself, we'll be hearing more about what CloudResearch is doing to invest in this area. So thank you to you both for joining me today. I'll leave you with any final thoughts, but I really appreciate you both being here.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a lot of fun.
Great pleasure.
Awesome.